Hello there, and welcome outdoors to the CHAP'S Guide. My name is Ash Jones, the curator of this channel, in which we seek to give advice, tips and life skills to chaps everywhere, so that you can be the best chap that you can be. Today, I asked the question, why has wearing hats fallen out of fashion for men, even when it's the perfect thing to wear for the weather? Let's get to it. So the reason I want to talk about hats today is a bit of an experience I had this morning. Today is the 11th of November in the United Kingdom, a special day in which we recognise and remember those soldiers, sailors and airmen who have gone before us in life and who made the ultimate sacrifice so that we may live in a free society. And in all towns, cities, small settlements, there will be some form of remembrance service taking place. So this morning, as I was getting dressed, getting ready to go out to work, I said to my wife that I'd be attending the service in a local town. And as I was getting dressed, I put on my Trilby hat. Here we go, my favourite Trilby hat. And as I was about to leave, my wife turned to me and said, "I hope you're not going to wear that in public." And I thought, well, why ever not? You know, this is a stylish, elegant piece of headwear which is perfect to protect me against the elements. Because today, as is often the case in the UK in November, it was a blustery, damp old day, and in fact the perfect day to wear a hat. And I thought to myself, why is it that we have gone on this journey as a society of chaps, whereas now we don't wear hats anymore, even though they are the perfect accompaniment to the weather in which we often face in this country, or any country where you get inclement weather in the wintertime. So I wanted to think about that, and as I was walking through the town earlier today on my way to the remembrance ceremony, I paid attention to what people were wearing on their heads. And you know, I was in fact the only man that I saw wearing any form of formal hat, other than a number of perhaps younger men who were wearing the ubiquitous, of course, the baseball cap, which you know, seems to be the item of style and fashion when it comes to headwear for anybody these days of any age. Because in fact, not to say it was all young people, I saw a gentleman who was clearly in his 80s wearing a baseball cap, and you know, no disagreement with that. I wear baseball caps myself from time to time, normally when I'm, you know, out running or in an environment where I want to keep the rain off my head, and perhaps a more formal hat would be inappropriate. So that's what this is all about today. I wanted us to have a chat about hats, and I wanted to give you some reasons why I think that the wearing of a hat can be a useful addition to anybody's wardrobe to make you look more stylish and as much of a chap as you can be. But I think it's worth reflecting on hats and, you know, the part they played in our society actually before we talk about why you should wear them. And hats have been with us for a long time. In fact, as long as anybody wanted to protect their head from the elements. And of course they've been, you know, a stylized piece of clothing for a long time. Often used to associate one's relationship or association with a body or organization. If you think about the military and civil organizations like the police, the fire service, their hats are, you know, very synonymous with those professions. They're easily identifiable, just the same as perhaps a clergyman's hat may be, or anything like that, which clearly denotes your relationship or association with a group, be that religious or professional in any way. I mean, there can be nothing more obvious perhaps than the mortarboard worn by an academic, or the policeman's helmet in this country, which, you know, makes people stand out in the crowd and they become a focal point for assistance and support if you need that. And of course, let's not forget that hats, in their original sense, are there to protect your head from the weather, and they've been serving that purpose for thousands of years. And it's only really in recent times that the wearing of hats in daily life has fallen out of fashion. I mean, you look at any photograph, perhaps from the early 20th century or even the later half of the 20th century, you'll hardly see an image of social activity or any public gathering without seeing men wearing hats. Now, they may not be wearing formal hats like trilbies or top hats or bowler hats. If it's a more working class environment, you know, the standard uniform might be perhaps the flat cap. I think it's probably the most or probably the second most popular hat still in use regularly in society today, certainly in the United Kingdom, but perhaps more associated these days with a rural existence or people who spend time outdoors rather than formality. I mean, I certainly don't think it would be appropriate to wear a flat cap of this nature, with a suit or perhaps something more formal, even though the wearing of these hats has come back into fashion a bit because of some, sort of high-profile television programs like Peaky Blinders and things like that, which have really brought them back into the public consciousness. But, hats have always been there, and perhaps they've just dropped off our horizon, our radar, in the latter few decades. So why do I think hats have taken a back seat in recent years? Well, it's very hard to say. I mean, I think we live in a time where increasing informality is becoming part of normal life. If you went back, 30, 40 years, I think even seeing a man not wearing a tie on any form of entertainment program or even in a public professional job would have been very unusual. Whereas today, the standard uniform or outfit of professional men in their place of work will be an open collared shirt. Even if they're wearing a suit, I think it's becoming more and more common to see people not even wearing a tie. So to think that people would wear a hat as part of their professional uniform, perhaps, you can understand why it's taken a back seat, and the wearing of hats as a commonplace thing has abated somewhat. But I'd like us to reflect for a moment on why hats are useful and how good they can be to add to your wardrobe. So why don't we start with today? I talked about today already. Today is Remembrance Day in the UK, a day when people gather in quite a formal environment where we remember soldiers, sailors and airmen who've made the ultimate sacrifice, as I said. And it's that time of the year where people do tend to wear a tie. They do tend to dress up in their best because it is, quite a somber event. And on a day like today, I guess tip number one for the positivity of wearing a hat is that wearing a hat immediately affords you a bit more gravitas. It makes you look more serious, more formal. And if you are attending an event like a funeral or a remembrance event or anything like that, where there's an element of importance to the way that you present yourself, I think wearing a hat just gives you that final top hat on the situation. You look that little bit more finished, bit more polished. You've gone to the finer details because you are wearing a hat when in most likelihood the people standing around you will not be doing so. And that leads me on to the second reason why I think wearing a hat is useful in events like that. Because it gives you a fantastic prop to use as part of your uniform, your clothing, your wardrobe, whatever you want to call it. Now today, for instance, the sort of act of remembrance comes at 11 o'clock, where the flag was lowered at the town centre and all the people present in uniform typically would salute, and those who are not in uniform just stand. I guess you would call it standing to attention if you were from a military background, but they just stood still and they looked at the flag. Now, as a hat wearer, I had the option, of course, to show my respect and my gratitude by taking off my hat. So when the bugler played the last post, I removed my hat as a sign of respect. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think wearing a hat can be a useful thing to have. In the old days, perhaps not the old days, but in more recent times when people wore hats, it would have been commonplace to tip your hat, if you saw a lady perhaps, as a sign of, saying hello or how do you. It's just one of those things which giving you a hat gives you an option to do which wouldn't be there if you weren't wearing that piece of your uniform. The other thing is height. Now when you wear a hat, I'm 5'9½", so kind of average height for a man. But when I wear my hat, of course, which gives me 2 to 3 inches of height, I'm immediately 6 feet tall. I guess this is one of the reasons why people like the police wear hats, so that they can be seen clearly in a crowd and identified by the public or their colleagues who seek to recognize them in a group of people. So if you are a person perhaps who are somewhat less tall, shall I say, rather than short, and if you're looking for a few inches to gain on your height, the wearing of a hat can afford you those extra few inches, that extra bit of gravity and height when you're in a crowd of people, and most certainly it will make you stand out from the crowd if nothing else. And aside from those things, there's one thing very obvious, and that's protection from the elements. Now, as a gentleman who suffers with a bit of a lack of hair myself, one of the things I really dislike is getting a wet head. So if I'm walking around and it's raining, because I've got no hair to sort of sop up that water, it runs down the side of your face, goes into your collar. It makes life very miserable and unpleasant. So wherever possible, if I think it's going to rain and I have the option, I will always wear a hat, simply because it's just great protection from the elements. And you can't, that is why hats were created at the end of the day, and I think there is no better reason to wear a hat than protection from inclement weather. I've already made reference to it, but a hat makes you stand out from the crowd. In this day and age, you're quite likely to be the only person wearing a hat, a formal hat, or perhaps a semi-formal hat like a flat cap, if you're in a crowd of people. So the beauty of that is that you're easily recognizable, and if you're a person who's confident and stylish and you want to stand out from the crowd, the wearing of a hat can certainly propel you into that status of, the person who's gone that little bit further. They've paid that little bit more attention to detail. Their appearance is perfect. And finally, I think, if you need a reason to buy a hat or to invest in a hat, one of those is that it can be a very useful, valuable addition to your wardrobe that can stand the test of time and last for decade after decade. Now, you don't have to spend a whole pile of money when you buy a hat. I think this Trilby here cost me about £20 from some sort of online site. I can't remember which one. But they're not expensive. It's not lined. It's not an extremely high quality hat, because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to get into the hat thing when I bought that hat a few years ago. And it's true, I do only wear it a few times a year, particularly when it's very cold and I'm looking to really insulate myself, because, they say you lose between 5 and 10% of your body heat through the top of your head. And for me, I like that 5 and 10% inside my body rather than disappearing into the air. So I think wearing a hat for that reason is nothing else, but a good investment in a hat is something that can last you forever. My father, who's 88 now, he bought a Trilby. I think he's told me several times that he's owned that hat longer than he's had me as a son, and I'm 50 this year. So quite remarkably, his hat has lasted all that time, and he wears it religiously every winter. I saw him wearing it the other day when he was driving his car, and it's an investment for him which has paid him back time after time after time. And of course, if you invest in a hat which is, shall we say, stylistically neutral, so something like I've just showed you, the Trilby I was wearing, it's black, it's somber, it can be worn with pretty much any style of clothing, and it can be worn with any colour of clothing. So it's something which I can use to complement my wardrobe almost regardless of what I'm wearing for many years to come. And in fact, I may even consider investing in a higher quality hat now that I've paid some thought to this whole hat situation, because I'm not uncomfortable standing out from the crowd. So if you're somebody who is prepared to be the best dressed person in any group of people, who's not afraid to stand out from the herd, to make a statement in the fact that you're prepared to have that little bit more formality, to be an individual, well, why don't you invest in a hat? And, it could make the difference when it comes to your wardrobe and standing out from the crowd. So thanks for listening today. I hope I've given you some thoughts in what you might think to buy a hat and wear a hat in the future. Please like and subscribe to this video, because I've got loads of ideas along these lines which I'm going to be uploading here in the coming months, and I would love to have you along on the journey with me. So thanks very much for joining me today at the CHAP'S, guys, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.